Hello and welcome to India's World. During the month of Ramzan this year, more than 300 people died in terrorist attacks in areas ranging from Orlando, Dhaka and Istanbul to Medina in Saudi Arabia. As Ramzan approached, the spokesman of the Islamic State, Abu Muhammad al-Adnani, gave a call to supporters around the world. He said, "Get prepared, be ready to make it a month of calamity everywhere for the non-believers." This clarion call probably led to lone wolves and groups which styled themselves as affiliates of the Islamic State to launch a series of terrorist strikes during the month of Ramzan. Why was the Muslim month of prayer and penance turned into such a grisly and gruesome month this year? And how does the Islamic State, so far away in Syria and Iraq, mobilize loyalty of jihadis as far away as Bangladesh and Indonesia? To discuss these questions and more, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador R.S. Kalha, a distinguished diplomat. He retired as Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, and he was India's ambassador to Indonesia and Iraq. We have with us Ambassador Neeraj Srivastava, another distinguished diplomat. He has served in Indian missions in Syria, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Canada, United States, and was India's ambassador to Uganda and Denmark. And we have with us our old friend, Professor A.K. Ramakrishnan. He is professor at the Center for West Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. I welcome all of you to this discussion. Professor, let me begin with you. Ramzan is traditionally viewed as the most holy and spiritual month in the Islamic calendar. Now, why did the Islamic State choose to convert the month of Ramzan into a month of war?
I think the Islamic State is now feeling the pinch of several kinds of pressures. And they thought that appealing to the larger Muslim world at this point of time, especially during the holy month, would be the appropriate thing to do, because they are facing internal kind of pressure because of the lack of resources now. The oil thing is now diminishing because of the lower prices. The arms supply that they've got initially is reducing substantially. And then, the whole quest for expanding its hold, not sticking to the traditional Iraq-Syria thing. They thought that this is the opportune moment, because that change of strategy is of utmost necessity now, because of the losing strength within.
Ambassador Srivastava, do you think that the Islamic State and other jihadis chose to make Ramzan the month of terror because Prophet Muhammad also waged his first jihad known as Battle of Badr during the holy month in 624? It was not called Ramzan at that time, but there was a holy month, whole month of peace and tranquility, no war. And 8 years later, he also conquered Mecca during the holy month.
You know, this is not the first time that such things have happened during the month of Ramzan. It has happened in the past also.
Absolutely.
That's the point number one. The second point is that during the month of Ramzan or Ramadan as they call it in Arabic, religious feelings run very high, because it is a month during which the Muslims focus on religion much more than at other points of the time. So if you do things or you commit acts which you define in religious terms, its appeal may be much higher during this month. I think that is the reason they have chosen this particular month to do that. Yeah. And it's happened many times in the past.
But Ambassador, do you agree with Ambassador Srivastava? Because last year also attacks took place during the month of Ramzan. Somalia was targeted. There was a Kurdish town that was targeted in Syria. A Tunisian beach resort was targeted. Why do jihadi groups, I mean, he's given us an explanation. You tell me whether you agree with him or you don't agree with him. So why do jihadi groups, earlier Al-Qaeda and its affiliates and now Islamic State, why do they want to mark Ramzan as a watershed marker for their followers?
Well, what Ambassador Srivastava said is true, but I would just like to add on to it and say there are two things. One, of course, is that the area or of operation of ISIS is largely contracting, simply because there is pressure coming not only from the Western countries like United States and so forth, but also from Russia. And secondly, what is happening is that they are now more inclined for publicity purposes. And this helps them because during the month of Ramzan, the Muslim mind is concentrated very largely on religion. And they know that if they were to undertake such activities like what happened in Bangladesh or previously what was happening in Indonesia, this would get them worldwide coverage. They are quite what you call susceptible to this kind of propaganda because it they think that it enhances their capability to strike wherever they can, perhaps more in Asia, where there are large Muslim communities like in Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei and so forth, and Bangladesh. So this gives them a kind of a status which they hanker for. And particularly at a time when their own base is contracting. So therefore, to that extent, this is the kind of a more of a PR stunt than anything else.
Okay. Professor Ramakrishnan, why did the ISIS attack or groups affiliated to ISIS attack the Prophet's tomb in Medina, the burial site of Islam's most central figure? Will this attack upset Muslims at large? Or do you think it will end up garnering more support for the puritanical or ultra-puritanical vision of Islam that the Islamic State has?
I think if, this is with respect to the earlier discussion that we had, putting everything along the religious lines may not serve the purpose because the whole linkage between religion and politics is very important at this point of time. The attack on Medina, for example, this is mainly targeted at the Saudi monarchy, its claim as the protector of the holiest shrines of Islam, rather than any kind of Islamic notion about Medina or anything of that sort. The power of Saudi monarchy to protect the holiest places, that is being challenged, and the ISIS has been making that
But don't they see the Prophet's tomb itself as a shrine, and you cannot worship a shrine in ultra-conservative Islam?
Right. That's the Wahhabi tradition, and that's applicable to the Saudis as well. But the Saudi monarchy gets a lot of legitimacy through that kind of a point of view. But the Saudi monarchy itself is converting Mecca and Medina into lots of new shopping complexes, destroying whole traditional mosques and other places. So that's nothing new within the region. But at this time, the attack, along with Jeddah and Qatif, why Medina was targeted, I think it was mainly aimed at the monarchy itself.
Okay, all right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with you in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing Islamic State's terrorism and the various ways it uses to expand its influence. Ambassador Srivastava, are countries which declare Islam as their state religion, whether it's Pakistan, Brunei, Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, are they a fertile ground for recruitment by the Islamic State? Because a rightward ideological shift probably is easier in states where the polity is already Islamicized.
That's correct. If Islam is a state religion and if Islam is given great importance in a country, it is easier to recruit from those countries because they don't place much value on secularism. They place a greater value on religion. So I must also point out that when you look at this whole number of Muslim countries, the number is more than 50 if you look at the membership of OIC, for example. And there are more than 20 Arab states in that. All of them are not monochromatic. It varies. The shades of Islam, it varies. At the one hand, you have Saudi Arabia, for example, and then you have relatively more liberal states such as Morocco, for example, where the same kind of Islam is not followed. So Islamic State would find it easiest to recruit from those countries which have Wahhabi Islam, follow the Wahhabi Islam ideology more than moderate Islam.
But Bangladesh doesn't follow Wahhabi Islam. Why? How are they finding groups which say we are affiliated to them?
Well, in Bangladesh,
Pakistan doesn't follow Wahhabi Islam. It follows South Asian version of Islam, but yet 12 attackers in Medina were Pakistanis.
Well, Pakistan is in the last several years, it is steadily moving towards Wahhabi Islam. If you look at their internal practices, people being sentenced to death for criticizing something or saying anything anti-Islamic. So Pakistan has moved a great deal towards Wahhabism, and in the future it might move even more. Bangladesh also, the ISI is active in Bangladesh. There are radical jihadi groups supported by Pakistan which are active in Bangladesh. And so they are trying to move the Bangladeshi population towards Wahhabism. Another point is that there are a very large number of expatriates of these countries in Saudi Arabia. And when they come back, there is a psychological shift which has already taken place in their minds. I'm not saying everyone, but a large number of them come changed, in their thinking and shifting more towards Wahhabism.
Okay, so Gulf money comes with the Wahhabism.
Yes, and Saudi Arabia has the largest number of expatriates, and if you take the Gulf as a whole, it runs into several millions, and that has an impact.
Ambassador Kalha, while the attacks during Ramzan were carried out in the name of the Islamic State, do you believe they were planned and executed by a central authority of the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq?
You see, what has happened in Bangladesh and what has happened, say, in Malaysia and Indonesia, there is no evidence of the fact that there is a command structure. But nevertheless, the attacks which took place in Indonesia and in Bangladesh give us an indication that the locals were influenced by a person of the same nationality. For example, say an Indonesian in the IS territories, who were passing messages on to these people. And secondly, the method which the IS has adopted is to use the social media. Now, in Southeast Asia, if you go there, you will find videos in local language. Not only in Malay, but in Bahasa Indonesia, you will find it in Tagalog, giving the IS message, which is then very widely distributed. And the important point to remember is that over a period of time, a large number of preachers from these countries have actually gone on scholarships to Saudi Arabia, where they have been inculcated with the Wahhabi brand of Islam. And when they come back, that's the kind of Islam that is being taught. I give you one very concrete example. Just look at Indonesia. During my time, you found that if you look at a mosque in Indonesia, it is designed more or less like a Hindu temple. In fact, if you face the mosque, it would look from far, it would just look like a Hindu temple. Go there today. Most of the mosques are now with the onion dome. If you look at the people, then look at the style of dressing. In my time, perhaps 1 out of 10 Indonesian women would wear the hijab. You go there today, it's about 8 or 9 out of 10. So you see progressively the influence has come from Saudi funding and Saudi scholarship. Yep. And that is the bane of the problem. And I think until we address that problem, you're going to have the same problem. Yeah. Again and again.
Okay, so Saudi Arabia, I hope they learn from the fact that their chickens have come home to roost. But let me ask you a slightly different question. Isn't the Islamic State also spreading its influence through franchises and affiliated groups? And if so, why are existing jihadi groups, why do they suddenly decide that they will now pledge allegiance to this Islamic State's leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi? In Bangladesh, there's no evidence of any direct communication. Right. But all you've got to do is put up the Islamic State flag and owe allegiance to this guy. the Orlando shooter, he shot people for whatever reasons he did, but before that he pledged allegiance. So why are people trying to become affiliates of Islamic State?
As you've rightly pointed out in your introduction, this is like the Al-Qaeda phenomenon. Lots of people claim allegiance to the group, but they need not necessarily have any organizational connection. From the Bangladeshi side, you see from government's own statements, there are some section talking about the ISIS connection, some others mentioning that it's a local phenomenon and so on. So we are not absolutely sure what are those connections. But there is an ideological influence, no doubt about it. But we have to expand that discussion to why ISIS was able to recruit people from Europe, from the United States. It's not about Saudi influence and other kinds of things. It's about the new youth kind of uncertainties, whole lot of consumerism and other things. There are a whole range of factors. So sticking on to see the ISIS phenomenon simply as something that is initiated by a branch of Islamic thought itself, that may be sticking the core of the organization together with Baghdadi's ideology. But the recruitment pattern shows a much wider tendency. But then one should also be careful that one should not generalize it as organizationally connected global phenomenon or things of that sort. I think it's still an Iraqi-Syrian phenomenon with the kind of strategic shift which it is needed at this point of time to expand its influence.
Okay, all right. We need to take a break again at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing Islamic State's terrorism during the month of Ramzan and its strategies for expansion. Ambassador Srivastava, there are a couple of things I'm confused about. If the affiliates or the franchisees of Islamic State do not receive any financial assistance or military assistance or even training in terrorist tradecraft, then is the affiliation to IS in some of the recent cases you've seen merely a flag of convenience to cover local jihad or local dissatisfaction with local governments? Or is it more than that? Is it that you're saying that we are affiliated to you because we share your ideology, and based on your ideology, we are choosing targets locally?
I would agree with the second part of your statement, that in a large number of cases, there may not be direct financial or other links between ISIS and local terrorist groups, but these local groups feel religiously or ideologically closer to the Islamic State, which has proclaimed itself as a caliphate. You must understand that point. And that has happened for the first time after the abolition of the caliphate in Turkey. So a caliphate with an area under its control and with resources under its control has an entirely different kind of appeal to misguided youth and to terror groups all over the world. Al-Qaeda never claimed that it was a caliphate, or for example, the Haqqani group or the Taliban, they're not caliphates. This is a caliphate. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi he said, I am the caliph. So that has a historical and religious resonance.
But a caliphate without geographical boundaries. He dropped Syria, Iraq and Levant from the name of the organization. It was Islamic State in, it was ISIL, right? Islamic State in Iraq and Levant.
Al-Sham. Al-Sham is the Arabic word for Syria, And that was because the territory primarily controlled by them was in these two countries. But it was a substantial amount of territory with a lot of petroleum also. So they had a territorial basis also. One more point I would just like to add in the context of the earlier point. Saudi Arabia is for the last several decades has also followed a policy of funding tens of thousands of madrasas in Islamic countries all over the world, in building tens of thousands of mosques in all over the world and sending Saudi preachers to these mosques. So these madrasas and mosques also have played a very great role in radicalization of the Islamic, of the Muslim population, including in Europe. If you look at Belgium and some of the other countries, you know, Saudis have funded mosques there in those countries. The preachers have preached radicalism. The point which Professor was making, how has the European population got radicalized? This is how it has got radicalized.
Master Kalha, there's also been the phenomena of leaderless terrorism or lone wolf terrorists, as in Orlando, for example. What explains this phenomena of thinking globally but acting locally? Is this linked to the idea of unity of the Ummah and the idea of the Caliphate, as Ambassador Srivastava was pointing out?
Well, obviously, they cannot establish contacts in so many countries. For example, operating from their own territories in Syria and Iraq, it's extremely difficult for them to establish contacts.
But they're doing it through the internet, so it's a virtual
caliphate. They are doing it through the internet, but nevertheless, you know, say financial aid or military kind of sort of aid is extremely difficult, considering the fact that you have both Russia and United States up against them. So what they are doing is they are encouraging lone wolf attacks. And if you look at the lone wolf attacks, some of them are very amateurish. Take the one which took place in Solo in Indonesia. The man tried to enter what they call a cafe to blow up, but he ended up by blowing up himself. I mean, it was a very amateurish effect. And even if you look at the Bangladesh recent one, just look at the picture which the IS have put out on the internet. It shows the 6 of them as attackers, but look very little closely. It's the same gun that everyone is carrying. It's a second-hand Kalashnikov.
I'm not on the power of the gun or power of the bomb. I'm on the power of the ideology, the ideology of a united Ummah, the ideology of a caliphate, the ideology of a millennial dream that Islam sees itself creating.
Well, it doesn't have that much resonance in Southeast Asia because recently the Indonesians, for example, the defense minister took a poll amongst the Indonesian population. 96% said we don't believe in their ideology. It's that 4% that they're worried about. And that is the one which is causing the problems. And that is why you have these lone wolf attacks. Otherwise, you would have had a much, much bigger scale attacks if the larger population was involved.
Professor Ramakrishnan, there seem to be 3 different kind of terrorists operating in the name of the Islamic State. Those that are in Syria and Iraq, the core territory, the core group. Then the second category is of the affiliates, voluntary affiliates, maybe with some links or no links, or let's say franchisees. And the third category is of the lone wolf attackers. Now, what should nations do to develop different kind of strategies to deal with these 3 categories of Islamic State terrorists differently? They're all Islamic State, but they require different treatment.
You're asking that to a wrong person, I think. I can.
Well, anyone of you can take it up.
Right. But the thing is that there is some problem with the Westphalian nation-state idea, a critique of which in itself was instrumental in the founding of the ISIS. The Caliphate was mentioned, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and what happened to the region, that kind of artificial states within the region and so on. So which is utilized by Baghdadi and others to institutionalize the Islamic State. And now trying to spread it. But I think its major aim is to spread it within the region, particularly towards the Gulf, to the Saudi Arabia. The other things...
They're just enthusiastic supporters,
yes,
misguided enthusiasm.
And maybe some, because that gives lots of...
Doesn't make it any less dangerous, but it was an unfair question to ask right at the end of the discussion. But one more unfair question before I go. Either of you can answer it. See, if Islam is not at peace with itself in terms of debates about which is the correct doctrine which determines what Islam is, can terrorism based on one doctrinaire interpretation or the other be eliminated? Because if they keep fighting amongst themselves about what is correct Islam, what is the correct way of running an Islamic polity, this is an endless game.
But you would note that there are a number of countries and a number of leaders, Sheikh Hasina being the latest, who have said that killing innocent people in the name of Islam is not Islam. This is the message which is given by the governments, even Saudi Arabian government. They don't say that, you can kill in the name of Islam. They all say that Islam is a religion of peace. The question is that governments need to practice what they preach. They don't practice that. And I can tell you that without naming names. If you want me to, I'll name names also if you ask me. Well, I know the names. But without naming names, I would tell you that the public statements which are made by certain governments are entirely different from the practices which they actually follow. Okay. The same governments give hundreds of millions of dollars of weapons and other assistance to ISIS.
Yeah.
And
we know who.
So I'll save you that thing. But in front of TV cameras, they say that, look, I mean, this is a religion of peace. We
are really running out of time, so just one sentence answer. At what point does Islamic terrorism move out of internal debate within Islam and become an attack against anyone who is considered an apostate?
You see, a problem is that schism in Islam has existed as long as the religion actually was born. In fact, they've had different versions of Islam. The most prominent one being the Sunni and the Shia schism, which took place hundreds of years ago. So the real question really is that Islam has to find a solution by itself. No outsider can find it for them. And secondly, if they claim that they are a religion of peace, then they should practice what they preach. Okay. Because I think the message which is now coming out is that what they actually believe in or what their precepts are is not what they practice. Okay. So I think that they have to find a solution for themselves.
All right. We've really run out of time. I'd like to thank all of you, Professor A.K. Ramakrishnan, Ambassador Neeraj Srivastava, Ambassador R.S. Kalha, for participating in this discussion. I wish we had more time, but unfortunately we don't. So I'll have to thank you there. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.